as we now look back, kind of from the 2015 perspective, kind of back the past 50 plus years, in the field of kind of organizational culture, learning, leadership, and change. What is it? So as you look kind of at that bigger landscape in the last 5+ decades, what is it that you have seen staying the same kind of, and what are kind of some of the developments you have seen? You already partly commented on that, but you know, looking at the whole now, what stands out for you looking back onto these years today?
What stands out most for me is the coercive power of culture and the limited tools we have for discovering how much our own culture coerces us. So we didn't talk much about mindfulness, but I'm a huge fan of Ellen Langer's work in this area. If you haven't explored her particular books, you must do so, because lots of people talk about mindfulness, but she's really a talented researcher who has shown, you know, several ways that we can become instantly more mindful. What I see happening over and over again is that people are not mindful of the degree to which they're acting out their own cultural selves, their own cultural norms, and how that's getting in the way of any kind of serious communication across. In my current work, for example, in the hospitals and patient safety, the degree to which doctors are unaware of the doctor culture and the nurses are unaware of the nurses culture leads to just constant bad communication, which leads to patient problems. So not just national culture, but particularly occupational culture imprisons us in seeing things in a certain way. And I don't think we have yet figured out the tools for how to overcome those kinds of cultural limitations. It's not about understanding the other culture, it's about understanding our own culture and seeing how that distorts everything. I think I'm more and more coming to that point. I haven't known how to write about it, except I am writing more about occupational cultures as being very important. But getting into ourselves is yet something to be done, and maybe the MOOCs can do it, particularly if you stimulate intercultural MOOC activity. That's something I haven't heard you talk about, but if you've got people in India and people in Brazil doing stuff, should they at some point interact with each other?
So what would be an example, like a practice we could use or experiment with? We have like kind of all the different systems, sectors, but also occupational, but also national cultures. Kind of what would be, and many of them, so many of them formed hubs, and in these hubs, some of them said, hey, what we experience here is we are a microcosm of society. Kind of, we have all these different aspects in our community here. So what would be a way of engaging these communities in a way that, as you said, is bending back the beam of observation onto one's own culture?
I would immediately order a book called The Culture Map by a woman at INSEAD, and what's her name? I've forgotten her name, but if you go to Amazon.
Yeah, we'll reference that. Yeah, we'll put the link for that.
She has developed 8 questions for intercultural communication. Things like how we make decisions, how we give feedback. They're much better than the Hofstede and all these other dimensions. And those kinds of questions asked across cultures, like how do we give feedback? You know, if you get a Japanese and an American together, they'll discover they're practically non-overlapping in how they give feedback.
Yeah.
But if you get Brazilians and Indians talking about this, how do we give feedback to each other in a work situation? It would lead to very important discoveries about some of the underlying themes in the national culture. And somehow this particular book has lots of stories and lots of examples. So one could just throw out some of those questions with some examples and ask the groups to wrestle with it.
And from your own books, Ed, kind of, you have been published and work in that field quite extensively. So which would be the one book kind of from your respective publications that you would recommend?
I think the helping book is the most concrete book. Every society has rules about how to help each other, or when someone asks for help, what do you do? I think the book that would most clearly deal with that is helping, because it goes beyond consultation. It's just people to people.
So coming back to the bigger question, kind of the past 50 plus years, kind of what changed and what didn't, what else do you see?
Well, I think the biggest change is clearly information technology and the social media, and the ambiguity about where this is all going. I've been reading a novel that you may enjoy called The Circle, which takes transparency to its logical conclusion. It's a terrifying novel.
The tyranny of transparency.
The what?
The tyranny of technology and transparency, right?
Yeah, exactly. What I see is that we now are in an intercultural world dealing with complex problems, dealing with more social responsibility, and we don't have the leadership or the cultural or the political skills to deal with complexity, diversity, and social responsibility. The world is forcing those on us, but we don't have the skills to deal with it.